Hey, what's going on everyone? Joe Menza here, and we're in for a little bit of a longer video here today. I'm using Strathmore 300, actually the backside, because I like the grain a little bit better. It's a cheaper paper. You can get it on sale actually right now. I think Hobby Lobby has it fairly cheap. So I've wet the whole paper down, and I'm kind of using a little bit of a blue tint here, a little bit of ultramarine. Do things a little bit differently in this one here, a little more complex. So I'm coming in with some ultramarine, and we're kind of layering a little bit here. Just using the hake, coming in with some blue. Some of this is going to be hidden behind a tree, but just to kind of show you here, coming in with a little bit stronger ultramarine blue. Just kind of some random dabbing here. I give it a little bit of a spray. Just kind of open up the middle a little bit. A lot of this stuff dries back, so a little bit is hit or miss, and you'll see when you're doing your own painting. Now I'm doing a little bit of cad yellow, little yellow ochre here. Again, a lot of this is going to dry back, and that's one of the things you're going to find when you're doing paintings like this, and you're using a lot of water. You're gonna lose about 50% of what you put into it. So this yellow here is not nearly going to be as obvious. Plus, I'm going to put a little bit more blue in here. And you'll see sometimes as you're painting along, things don't always come out as strong as you had planned, but sometimes they still come out okay. And you can live with them. So again, ultramarine blue, some yellow ochre, a little cad yellow mixed in, just to get a little bright in the background here. Again, on the right side, I'm going to have a tree that's going to cover up some of that sky, but a little bit of it will show through. So I'm taking a little bit of white here now, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of white. This is Winsor & Newton white gouache, titanium white. So this dries back quite a bit. If anything, this is just more of a lightening agent than it is a white in this particular case, because it's not like when you paint with oils and you put white on there and it really stands out, or even acrylics. It tends to just totally dry away. And it depends on what brand you're using. Sometimes if I use M grams, tends to stand out a little bit more. I feel like Winsor & Newton's a little bit more liquidy. So if you want it to stand out more, you really got to put it on heavy to get it to really do its thing. But one of the good uses for white is if you put it on in a milky fashion, it will lighten things, and it'll make things, sometimes it can make things a little chalky, but if you put it on in a certain way, it can lighten things, and it can be very subtle. So now I'm just putting a little bit toward the bottom here just to blend in what's going to be some water here. Just blending now, just doing some blending here. And just a quick little dry with the hair dryer. And again, just some more blending. Again, just a very, very subtle effect. We'll just do a little bit of blending and drying at the same time. A lot of times I'll do sort of more beginner videos and I just stick to a more of a process. This here shows kind of my process when I'm painting and I'm having a good time and I'm getting into it and I'm kind of going for something, and then I try to enhance it, or should I say fix it, or kind of bend it to my will of where I want it to go. So now that I have this here, I'm going to do a quick dry. I won't put you through the whole drying process. And now I'm going to put a bit of a mountain in here. And I'm using burnt umber, some Van Dyke brown, a little bit of ultramarine blue. I think it looks a little darker on camera than it actually is. But I make it a little bit darker because when I do any kind of scraping or any kind of white over the top, I want a good contrast. And you know, this mountain is probably, I think we're going to go a little bigger here. This is a little small. The only problem is I kind of, I'm going to lose a little more of that yellow in the background, but that's okay. We're going to get a little bit of it on one side. But I've decided I want a little bit bigger of a mountain, coming in with a little more blue on top of that brown. And that peak just not big enough. I be careful there because I don't want to cover up that little bit of yellow. I'm going to give it a little spray for some texture. And I'm just going to pop in the bases of what I plan to have a couple little land masses down below. Again, a lot of this is a little bit of hit or miss, and it's, you know, letting the happy accidents happen, as they call them. Now I'm just kind of blending the bottom of that mountain. A little bit of that white is blending in, so it's kind of making it a little softer. So now I'm going to take the card, and you can do this too. You don't have to add the white, you know, that I'm going to add, but this is taking a little loyalty card here and just scraping in the peaks. And you can leave it just like this. I like how it looks scraped in, but sometimes I want a little bit of snow, and it really brings out the mountain. I just happen to like using white. I know a lot of people, I've had posts where people say, oh, I liked it until the white popped in. And, you know, that's a purist type thing, a watercolor. It's still technically watercolor, but I do recognize that some people don't want to use it. So we'll give it a quick dry. Again, I'm not going to put you through the full drying process. We've got the makings of our land masses on the bottom, the water coming through. And the goal of this is to use water spray bottle and to kind of work out some semi-realism. So here I'm going to put in a bit of a pine tree. I'm going to take the fan brush, which I like to use for pines. They really, I feel like, give you that random branch effect. And I'm using a dark green. I mean, I'm really ultramarine blue, Payne's gray, and a cad yellow. But I've made it very, very dark so that doesn't stand out as much as the tree that will go into the right side. So I'm just going to put a little grass down in the bottom here, kind of the makings of. And sometimes when I'm doing these and then I start spraying with water, I lose a little bit of what I originally intended, which is fine. I'm kind of going for some randomness and some textures and some flowing of the water, you know, so you could better understand my process as I go. So we're taking I'm just using the fan brush. I'm too lazy to pick up another brush, but I'm just putting in the trunk of a tree. You can easily use the hake brush for this. Kind of making a Y-shaped tree. And if you're, you know, if you're trying this, try, you know, do some different trees. Make it your own. So I just gave it a little bit of a spray. I just kind of want to break that tree up a little bit. And I'm taking now my little loyalty card. I'm doing a little scraping for the trunk. And this works good when you go a little heavier. And while I'm at it, I'll scrape in a few rocks on this side. So back to this side, now that this side is a bit dry, and we'll start putting in some branches. I'm using sort of a needle brush here, needle rigger type brush, and I'm just using the same tree colors again, and just very carefully putting in some branches. The thing about this is when I do these branches, I find when I put the leaves on the trees, it ends up covering them up anyways, but it's still fun to do and fun to show you. You can leave your tree like this. You could put very few leaves on it and let those branches stand out. You know, mix it up a little bit. Some people like bare trees, and they do look cool. I'm just kind of dry brushing some branches in here. Again, usually it ends up being kind of for naught because I end up putting the leaves on and I get a little heavy with that. But at least you can see kind of how it's done. So I'm just kind of working in those working on those little land masses there. So now I'm going to lighten up the bottom of this mountain and soften it a little bit with a wet tissue. And I'm going to put a little bit of a tree line in there. So I'm coming back in with some cad yellow, making a green out of the cad yellow, ultramarine blue, and Payne's gray a little bit. And just using the spread nature of the fan brush, making light strokes down to look like a little bit of a distant tree line. So now for a little interesting part, I'm now taking the white gouache on the end of my fan brush and I'm tapping in the tops of these trees. And you'll see why momentarily here. It's an interesting effect, and I give it a little spray so that the white runs into the treetops. In some ways it looks a little like smoke or like a little bit of snow. And now I'm just taking my finger and I'm just lightly going over these mountains here to create a little bit of a snow effect. Now, when I go over these with my finger, yes, the snow does dry back. Now, you can come back at the end, and if it needs more, you can add more. But usually when I go over with my finger, it's heavy enough that I get enough on there that it usually doesn't need any more added. So now I'm just working on the bottom here with the little bit of a shadow area that will be where the tree is. One of the things I try to go for if I'm doing water is I'll work it, with the darks and some lights and a little bit of white mixed in, and I'll spray it until it comes up with a liquidy effect. Now here I'm using a sort of an unusual color here that I've kind of mixed in a little bit. It has white in it already. This is a color by Whole Bean. It's an unusual color. It's called lavender. And it's basically like a white with purple in it. So I've been using some different combos of whites lately. First of all, I've used the titanium gouache. And then I have another one called buff titanium I'm using, which is like a little yellowy white, like a beigey white. And then I have this lavender, which is a white with like a little bit of purple in it. So trying to get a realistic effect for the water with a focus on the center being the center point of light. So now I'm taking this hake brush, I've squeezed out most of the water, and I've roughed up the bristles, and I dipped it into a little bit of the green that's still on my palette, and then some cad yellow. And now I'm going to move this around and just create some leaves. So I went sort of a 3-shade type thing. That's what I always say, like my threes. 3 shades of any color to give it that effect. And this here will have the brighter yellow, and then some bluer green, and then some green, as I'm doing now. So I'm just pressing that in there, getting that into the bristles, and kind of, moving the brush around to get a different pattern. So when you take the cad yellow, one of the things nice about that cad yellow hue is it's one of the colors that you can actually go over the top of a darker color to a lighter color, and it creates a neat effect, at least in my opinion. I really like the effect that it gives. I'm just going to re-scrape this tree trunk a little bit. And when I scrape, I'm going to create some roots on the tree too. Because that creates a neat effect, really, or something I really like. And I'll tell you, for this being an inexpensive paper, I mean, you can get what did I get? Like 11 by 14. I think it was a pad. I have to look, but it was like $12. It was on sale for 40% off. And the first time I went to use it, I was like, I don't know if I like the grain. But then I took the pad and I started looking at it. By the way, I'm just putting a few more limbs back into this tree. But I looked at the back and I'm like, the back side almost has more of a linen quality to it. The front of it, or what you would think would be the front, had sort of a cockly grain, like the grain wasn't even. It's hard to describe, but like larger shapes. And so when you paint on it, it almost stood out too much. And then when I looked at the back of the paper, I'm like, this has a very small grain, a linen-y grain. Let me try the back. And for an economy paper, say not too bad, really. For the type of painting we do here, this fast and loose, sort of heavier, bolder paint, watercolor. That's what I do. We don't really need expensive paper. If you're doing very elegant soft washes and, things very transparent watercolor, you're going to want to use cottony paper because the way that the way it blends is going to work better for that. But for this, with, laying on the paint the way that we do, and, going in heavier and going with shapes, you can really get away with a less expensive paper. Now, there's some bad papers out there, don't get me wrong, that they just, they're not worth it. But you got Strathmore 300. There's a Strathmore 400, which I'm kind of revisiting. I'm revisiting these papers that in the beginning I tried and I thought, maybe this is why I'm not painting so well. And sometimes it can be. But I tried Strathmore 300, Strathmore 400, and I wasn't really a fan of it. And then I'm like, well, it's on sale. Maybe I'll go back to it. Maybe, if you paint on any paper long enough, you get to know its, idiosyncrasies. There's 100% cotton papers out there that are a little more economical. Some Chinese papers and things, and they have their little issues too. Even Arches, over time, it's one of the best papers, but you're going to find the way the water soaks in. You're going to need a few paintings to become really familiar with that paper. And sometimes it's good to paint on that paper a lot, if that's going to be your go-to paper. If you like certain aspects about it, if you like the grain, paint on it a lot, and you'll get really to know that paper. So it just, it really depends now. I still like to use Fabriano Studio. It's 25% cotton. Thing about that paper is the water sits on top. It does not absorb right away. So you have this sheen and you have this paint on top. And what's nice, it's almost like hot press in a way. It gives you time to work with it to some degree. But also it can have some unusual blending characteristics that may not work for the way you want to work. So if you're doing soft washes, things like I say, the 100% cotton paper is going to be more your go-to. But for stuff like this where, I'm not really taking advantage of all the transparency of watercolor. I'm painting almost more in like a lot of people say, oh, your paintings look like oil paintings or they look like acrylic, because of the heaviness of the paint, which also leads people to say, why are you using watercolor? Paint's more expensive, da, 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 da. There are some aspects of the watercolor that come through the fact that you can spray it, you can lift it, and how sometimes you can get certain textures out of it, and it's easy cleanup, all of that stuff. And then there's the factor of I didn't really want to be I don't want to copy necessarily. There's a lot of different styles of watercolor out there. You could look at Edward Seago and, there's a lot of different variations. So in the end, I want to kind of have, too, my own look, which is something you should go for as well. Embrace what it is that you're doing. Find some aspect to what you're doing and really get in there. Confidence is key. The last couple weeks, I don't know, my paintings were just they just weren't going the way I wanted to go. And that's kind of can be discouraging. But sometimes I think if you put on your favorite music, you put on headphones, and you just get in there and you paint like you're the greatest artist in your own mind is fine. The confidence of that, paint like this is what's meant to be, and you'll get past that point. We had someone in the group asking, have you ever got to this point where nothing seems to go right, or you just can't stand what you're doing? Yeah, all the time. It happens a lot. And I think what's happening with that is visually, I think your eyes kind of look at something and your expectations have gone up. And it takes time for your painting now to rise to that next point. And I've always said it's like leveling up in a video game. It's like you achieve a new level. So with every discouraging moment, and those kind of blocks, usually a breakthrough comes, and your painting turns a corner, and you go to the next level. At least that's the way it's worked for me. So I'm trying to get some purple, little bit of purple. I don't want to go too far, but I want a bit of a purpley blue effect in here for the water. So I'm just kind of playing a little bit. I'm being light with this. One thing I noticed, this paper it can pile very easily. That's the one thing about it, is you cannot abuse this paper too much. That's usually the case with cheaper papers. Now, Fabriano Studio is a tough paper. You can beat on that. You have Canson XL. That one you can easily, if you scrape it too hard, it'll look scratched. And sometimes you can actually roll off the surface of the paper. You can see in one of my other videos that I show where everything kind of goes wrong. So you have to be a little more gentle with it. Arches is tough paper. You can really, you can go at it. But if you scrape and you lift, after about 3 times, any paper you'll start to notice, you'll see little specks of the paper start to come off. And then we've gotten a little too abusive with it. So this is just sort of detail here that I'm just kind of sculpting, I like to say. I'm spraying and I'm kind of shaping what I want here. So you can kind of see my process is when I sit down and I do a painting, more so for me. I mean, when I do a painting and I intend on doing a video, I video almost every painting that I do just in case it comes out good or I want to refer back to it. But if it's good, I mean, really good, I'll put it out there. But these here where I go longer and I'm really trying to achieve something, I kind of look at it's like sculpting. I'm kind of working with it. Don't want to overwork it, but as long as it stays wet, and that's why I use the spray bottle a lot. So the brushes I've used in this one, I've used the Hake. I used a large and I used the medium. Those and the large Hake I tend to use from the beginning. I use that for the bigger washes, and then for shaping things like mountains or trees, I'll go down to the medium Hake, and then for pine trees, I'll go to the fan brush, and then for branches and little sticks and things, I'll go to the rigger, and then I may use a flat brush like here. I don't know why. Sometimes I'll just trying to keep some narrow strokes in there. So my go-to little side tools now, I use a plastic card. I will use a toothbrush for flicking water. I'll use my spray bottle and a tissue. Those are things that I always have now with me in any of my pallets or my supply boxes. I always have those with me. So with the card, you can make rocks, you can scrape, and you can create textures. And then with the tissue, you can wipe things and you can dab at things and lift a little bit and create textures. The spray bottle, you can create runs and let things drip a little bit or keep things wet. And then finally, the toothbrush, if you want to flick water into a particular area and break it up, you use the toothbrush. And then finally, if I don't have a toothbrush, which half the time I lose it and I look around and I'm like, I'm constantly losing things within a foot of my field of view. If you take a spray bottle and you spray it and you turn it upside down and you spray it till it runs out, you'll get a few last little blobs of water that'll almost work like the toothbrush. So I'll take a spray bottle, I'll turn it upside down, I'll spray it like twice, and then spray it on the painting, and a few little blobs will come out. And another neat little thing you can do with the spray bottle is, or the toothbrush, if you flick it onto a dry paint and you let it sit for about 5 seconds, and then you take a tissue and you wipe it, it'll actually lift up little dots. I'll have to show that in a future video. So now I'm giving this a good dry here. So I do find listening to music to be very helpful when you're painting. And to put on some good, maybe noise canceling headphones and just kind of shut out everything around you. Sometimes I'm looking for a calm, serene sort of scene, and I feel like I want to be calm when I go into the painting. So I'll listen to more of that relaxing music, like the sleep music that you hear. It's just like a calming type music. And then sometimes if you need the energy and you need the, you put on like the stadium rock or whatever you want to call it, the pump up music to really get you in that frame of mind, and you'll get good energy. Create a playlist and have some songs that you go through. Maybe there's songs that pump you up to, get you excited about what you're painting, and that energy will come through into the painting. That between the spontaneous nature of it, you'll have the energy in there. And then sometimes when you just want to sit down and you want to relax, put on that calming. If you go on YouTube, they've got, you're on YouTube now, but if you go on YouTube, you look for like calming, relaxing sleep music or study music or whatever they call it. And a lot of it is just sounds like just calming. And that's what I go for in a lot of my scenes. I want people to enjoy it, and you look at it and you say, I'd really like to be in that place. So now I'm working this bottom section and just getting it right. I don't know how I can convey that, but there'll be a point where I do a stroke of paint, and then I'll put a little bit of spray water on there, and it'll kind of just drizzle down in such a way, and some of the colors underneath, like the yellow that was there, will still be present because it dried, and it'll come through. So those are areas where I'm utilizing a little bit of the transparency. You can see that in the middle. So there's almost a yellow, and then there's some of that run that came through, and it's just subtle enough to really do the job. So a lot of drying in this one. You can see my process here. This is, about a 45-minute. Usually no more than an hour do I spend on any painting, unless I was doing some architectural, like a house or something like that, that requires more time, or maybe like a city scene. Sometimes I might take a little longer on. The quickie ones, 10, 15 minutes, those are just, quick, fun, just diversions. But this here where I really want to sit down and, do something a little more epic, I'll put a little bit more into it. And these really are the ones I like doing. I mean, people might say, well, you do a lot of mountains. I do like them. I mean, that was one of the draws, watching TV painters back in the 90s. But I do like to do woodland scenes and different things like that too. There's only so many really that you can do, just, basic nature scenes, hills, mountains, rivers, lakes, things like that. But thankfully we have the change of seasons, so we can do winter, fall, summer kind of thing. So I'm just kind of rubbing this in with my finger. I just want to blend this a little bit. Again, the problem with this white gouache is it tends to really dry, almost to where it disappears sometimes. So I'm just coming in with a little bit of, couple of different yellows on my brush, and I'm just highlighting now some of the foliage that I've put on this little peninsula, jetty, island, whatever I guess you'd call it. Almost makes you want to stand on that spot and just look out into the mountains. So when you're there, you're looking across and, you can really feel, you can really feel the scene. So yeah, the next one, I think next week we'll do more of a woodland scene again. I've had people asking about that, so we'll do more trees, more of a being in the woods type thing. Maybe we'll bring the guy and his dog back. I haven't done that in a while. A lot of times I'd like to put in a figure in the painting. Like, I suppose I could have put a guy down in the bottom, but a lot of times, like, at the end, I'm like, I don't know if I really want the distraction. I don't know if I really want to put a person in there. And sometimes, like, I don't really know, where should I put the person? One thing you can do is, if you have a piece of plastic, you can always put a figure on there and then kind of move it around on the painting and see, would a figure go in nice here before you take the plunge and you put one in. You don't want to just put one in to put one in. But sometimes it's nice to have a figure for a little bit of life in the painting. I mean, that's why I always put a couple of birds in there. It seems like that needs, some kind of life. I think it was Bob Ross, though. I think he had maybe 2 paintings he did with people in them out of 400 or so paintings. He didn't usually put people in. Matter of fact, he'd put a little cabin or something in there, and he'd say, and one, it was kind of horrifying. He said that maybe the guy fell in the water and he died or something. I'm like, whoa. But it was funny at the time. This upper area here now, I'm taking my cloth and I'm just kind of rubbing it out. I feel like I need just a little bit more light at the top here. So rather than put in any more white, which faded back anyways, I'm just kind of rubbing away a little bit, lifting a little bit of paint just to get a little bit more light in that corner. Well, I'll put a little bit more white in here and we'll see what happens, but I don't have a lot of faith in it. This, like I said, this color here dries back quite a bit, especially when you hit it with water, like I hit it with the spray bottle to blend. But there was a funny mark in the corner that I kind of wanted to eliminate. So here it is in its virtual frame. No, this is not the virtual frame. This is the matte, sorry. And we'll kind of zoom in here and we'll look at everything. Little white that I put on the, for water line. And that hasn't dried back. So this is fully dry now. And then we can see the little trees back there, the pine. And that's pretty much it. I think it turned out pretty well. There is one thing here that I'm going to fix, and you'll see in the virtual frame. There was a dot in the center of that mountain, and I kind of just rubbed a little bit of white on there to eliminate that. So that's it. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope your painting goes well, and have a wonderful weekend.